am back with a very amazing and inspiring woman who is the future business leader. She is from UK.
Change is the law of life, and those who only look to the past are certain to miss the present and the future.
My name is Helene, and I will be chatting with Dr. Musa today about my career history.
I'm going to ask your life story, your transformation from a young girl to a successful businesswoman in Gulf.
We moved to the United Arab Emirates when I was 20 years old, which is pretty much unheard of for most. A lot of my friends were still in university. My first kind of entry into the corporate world was through an apprenticeship with a recruitment company. Now, that gave me on-the-ground experience in recruiting healthcare professionals.
We can see more women in the workplace than the men. How you balance your family life with your work life?
So I think it's a very important topic because not just locally here in the UAE but worldwide there is a lot of discussion. Now in the UAE we've seen a lot of reforms recently, so we're seeing extended maternity leaves applicable to some, and we've also seen a real focus on flexible working and home working. Thanks. Personally have pretty much always, and especially in my current role, worked in a very male-dominated environment, but that's not something that I particularly feel affected by, or that I've even really taken into consideration. On the contrary, if there are some companies or organisations out there which may be discriminating against women or mothers, the great thing is that the law protects this. UAE labour law is very firm, so I feel very optimistic about the women workplace in the UAE, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot more female leaders coming up.
And what I see is they are good, but they don't know how to present themselves. And what are your advice in terms of resume, biodata or profile?
You need to tailor-make your CV and pick out keywords from the job description, put them in your CV and change that for every job you apply to. You look for a recruitment agency that specialises in your specialism. They will more than likely be able to perhaps help and send your CV out to some of their clients, along with obviously checking job boards and job postings, and I think that you will maximise the chances on getting your CV noticed.
If they are from healthcare industry specifically, what they should do that Gulf become their second home.
So I'll give a short rundown of the licensing in the UAE. So in Dubai we have what's called the Dubai Healthcare Authority, and in Abu Dhabi and other Emirates we have what's called Ministry of Health. A lot for more medical professionals are taking a proactive approach and going out there and getting the medical license themselves, so that they will be more appealing to hire to hospitals, clinics and healthcare setups here in the UAE. A lot of documents are supplied and verified by a third party called data flow, and then sometimes in the rare occasion a healthcare professional may have to sit a prometric exam, which is like a licensing exam, and then they will get their eligibility letter and they can start seeking work, and then that is then changed to a full license once they find an employer. It's quite daunting and it is hard to find the information out there online, so I'll give you a few points on what to Google. You can Google data flow, Dubai Health Authority, but the good thing is there's a lot of recruitment agencies that specialise in placing healthcare professionals into the people like me as well. The kind of recruitment directors of individual hospitals can always give advice too. So
there will be more women and less men. Means that today we need to prepare the women for a future leadership. I want your advice, who is listening to us, what they should do to be successful like you.
I want to say break the bias, and I'm saying that to all women listening globally.
Women, believe in yourself, break the bias and don't feel inferior. You are the future leader.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am back live from Dubai World Trade Center with a very amazing and inspiring woman who is the future business leader. She is from UK and has landed in Dubai last 1 decade before, and she is like doing an amazing stuff for the Gulf region. I'm going to ask so many questions from her. She is going to share her success story, the obstacles, how she made it possible to convert herself from a young female kid to a successful businesswoman. So I feel lucky and I feel honored that she is sitting right next to me, and I'm going to introduce with her.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome from Dubai, although it doesn't feel like Dubai today because it's incredibly rainy. We get about 1 day of rain every year, and that is today. My name is Helene, and I will be chatting with Dr. Musa today about my career history and what Dubai has done for me working out here for the last decade or so.
What a lovely introduction, Helene. So I'm going to ask your life story, your transformation from a young girl to a successful businesswoman in Gulf. People outside listening to us are very excited and very keen to know that how you made it possible.
Thank you so much, Dr. Musa. So I have quite a unique story in the sense that I actually moved to the United Arab Emirates when I was 20 years old, which is pretty much unheard of for most. A lot of my friends were still in university, embarking on master degrees, and I had decided to take that leap. And how I ended up here was that my first kind of entry into the corporate world was through an apprenticeship with a recruitment company. Now, that gave me on-the-ground experience in recruiting healthcare professionals into the GCC region, specifically the UAE and also Saudi Arabia. So that was a really unique experience because I learned more about two countries that I had never even really known anything about, both culturally and also geographically. So that continued for about 3 or so years, kind of in my late teenage years. And then I had the opportunity to come over to Dubai for a work conference. Now, that was very interesting. It was my first time on the ground in Dubai, and I had met loads of exhibitors and people presenting at a local healthcare conference in Dubai. Now, by chance, I got offered a job on the spot by a recruitment agency on the ground here, and they wanted me to come on board and start recruiting healthcare professionals into the GCC region, but still be based on the ground here. So I thought, what a wonderful opportunity. I took the opportunity straight away. I went back to London and I had to pack up all of my things and relocate the following month. So I relocated completely on my own. It was a little bit daunting at first, to say the least. Some kind of procedures when onboarding into a new country, such as the UAE, are difficult when you don't have Arabic as a common language, and just kind of learning new processes and procedures and settling in. So I stayed in the agency side of recruitment for a good year, and then by chance I got headhunted by one of my clients, which was King's College Hospital, London, UAE. They were one of my clients I was recruiting doctors for, but I was also very familiar with their UK operations because they are one of the largest teaching hospitals in the UK. So I checked in with them and I moved over and started recruiting doctors, nurses, allied health professionals for their 3 sites. They had 2 clinics in Dubai, and they were ramping up to open a multi-specialty hospital in Dubai Hills, which opened at the beginning of 2020. Then I stayed till hospital opening at King's, and then I got headhunted again for Saudi German Health, who are one of the largest private hospital groups in the GCC region, specifically Saudi Arabia. So they wanted somebody that could effectively come on board and help ramp up the new hospitals that they had opening, because they were growing substantially in Saudi Arabia. So I've been with them now for, goodness, about 3.5 years, and I've had a fantastic journey. I've helped staff their existing hospitals, which were 5, and I also led from A to Z the activation of the Dammam Hospital, which opened last year, and all the future projects that are coming up, such as Mecca and a second hospital in Jeddah. So it's been a great career, really, and I honestly think that it's something that I couldn't have achieved if I was working in the UK, because career progression is so linear and there's not really much scope for organisations to kind of think outside the box with their approach to hiring and progressing. So I do think I've excelled at an extreme rate over the last decade, and I do thank Dubai for that. I think that I wouldn't be here at this level, at this director level of a role, if I hadn't moved to the Middle East almost 10 years ago.
So it's a lovely story, and I feel the life of a woman is not easy. When a woman is born in some countries, she is stressed. People are not happy because their culture is looking for a son, and maybe they have a feeling that this son will get more money in comparison of a woman, which women is actually trying to prove it opposite. We can see more women in the workplace than the men, and the woman is doing better and progressively contributing to their families and ultimately the society. So my next question from you is about your work balance. So we know that there is a family life which every woman is handling on the same time. You have work pressures. You are working in a company who always depend on you, being you have managerial and leadership capabilities. So as you give more inputs, the company start relying on you. So the job does not remain like 9 to 5. Then you are all the time into your work. So that's the question every woman wants to ask from you, that how you balance your family life with your work life.
Great question, Dr. Musa. So I think it's a very important topic because not just locally here in the UAE but worldwide there is a lot of discussion that's going on about how to make the workplace more friendly for women, especially women that may have families and children. Now in the UAE we've seen a lot of reforms recently, so we're seeing extended maternity leaves applicable to some, and we've also seen a real focus on flexible working and home working thanks to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we are seeing a lot of that now. I mean, one example I can give is that the UAE very recently changed the weekend to Monday to Friday to align with the international markets, and they're actually giving a half day on Friday. And from my HR perspective and speaking to people in the industry, I've noticed that this half day on Friday, a lot of companies have mandated this can be worked from home. So we're seeing a lot more flexibility and trust in employees to work remotely and in a more flexible way. Now, as for women themselves, I think that the UAE has always been very friendly when it comes to the working environment. I personally have pretty much always, and especially in my current role, worked in a very male-dominated environment, but that's not something that I particularly feel affected by, or that I've even really taken into consideration. One very unique rule that I've observed here in the UAE, which doesn't exist in the UK at all, is that new mothers are actually given an extra hour of leave every day to leave the workplace and nurse their children at home. So little things like that really show the importance of women, but also mothers. So I would have no qualms about thinking about becoming a mother in the UAE, because I know that the law supports me. On the contrary, if there are some companies or organisations out there which may be discriminating against women or mothers, the great thing is that the law protects this. UAE labour law is very firm in explaining the rights that women should have. There's a lot of things around that a woman can't be terminated whilst she's on maternity leave, and also there is a lot of flexibility that the employer has to give to meet demands of the woman who may be nursing their child on maternity leave or having childcare commitments. So I feel very optimistic about the women workplace in the UAE, and I think that's why we're seeing a lot more female leaders coming up. I mean, you can read Forbes magazine, they have a whole piece on top women leaders in the Middle East, and a lot of them are hailing from the UAE, and I believe that's because of the friendly atmosphere for women that they have in this country.
I can feel a love of UAE in your talks, and I enjoy the same love. And we are in Gulf from a long time. Gulf actually give a lot of opportunity to the women. I feel that I saw women converting themselves from an ordinary office assistant to the self-independent businesswoman who is running good brands over the period of time. Of course, nothing happened overnight. We have to spend time and energy and resources. We have to deploy all the appropriate strategies to become a successful woman. What I exactly want to know about the life of a women in United Arab Emirates. Why this question is really important, that when I interview women from these are the developing countries, I feel a pain in the voice of a woman that when she comes out of the home, she is not secure, she don't have opportunities for work. When she go to the schools, college, universities, she is having a lot of struggle in terms of how to feed herself, how to face about physical protection. So there are people who don't have privilege to enjoy a very safe and nice life as in UAE. So I want to ask you, like, what is your experience as a British living in Gulf as a woman in terms of your general life and in terms of your professional life?
Well, the first thing I can say about the UAE and Dubai as a whole is that the country is extremely safe. It's shocking, actually. It's a big culture shock for me anyway, coming from the UK. And what I mean by this is that Dubai seems like the only city in the world where I can walk around at 3 a.m. in the morning and not be hassled or pickpocketed by somebody. And even if in a restaurant you can put your handbag on the table and then walk away and come back and your belongings will still be there. On a few occasions I've left things in taxis, I think my laptop and my mobile phone once, and it got back to me within the hour. So it's very unique, something I've not experienced in any other city in the world. The only downside of this is when I do go back to the UK, specifically London, I feel like I've lost a little bit of my street smarts because I get mistaken about how safe Dubai is, and I forget that not everywhere in the world is like that. Specifically for a woman, this is very important. I mean, I think women are looking for safety everywhere in the world, and Dr. Musa mentioned developing countries, but even a lot of headlines in the UK, which is considered a developed country at the moment, is a lot about women's safety, because it's got to the point now where women don't feel safe walking home at night. They feel like they have to put their keys in between their hands and always be alert, not listen to music when they're walking along. So I think it's a global topic which I'm blessed to not have to think about whilst living here. Now, I do think there's some quirky things as well that are applicable to women here in the UAE. I'll give you an example. So the other day I went to renew my car at the, we call it Tasjil, it's kind of like the car servicing government office here in Dubai, and I drove in and I saw that they had parking spaces just for females. So the whole car park was full, but there was an empty female parking space, so I took that opportunity straight away. So just little things like that to make life easier for women is much appreciated. A bit like when you kind of go to government offices and they have a queue for females as well. It's just very easy to get the job done quickly and you're in and out. I think the population ratio here is about 60-40, with women being at the lower end of the percentage. So it means that when there are female-only services, there's usually less people there and we get a quick, succinct service. So no complaints at all. I'm very satisfied.
That's amazing. It's always worth to listen these ladies who are really satisfied with the progress and the safety and security and life in UAE. That is amazing. I guess all the world leaders should study the model that UAE adopted and provided their citizens with the best secure life. This is an example, and all the world leaders should try to copy paste this model in their countries. With this, I have another question, that there are so many women listening to us, and they always ask me this question, no matter they are 20 years or they are 60 years, they are 50 years, they are not happy in their countries, their places they live, because there is no security, there is no job opportunities, and they are struggling to feed themselves and their families. Sometimes their husbands are not settled enough to feed them, secure them. So what they see is UAE, and the most important is Dubai. Particularly, I want to ask how these women can come to UAE. What is your advice? What they should do that give them a lot of opportunities to enter in this country and settle and stand on their own feet so they can achieve financial independence and they enter into a global life?
Great question. So we have obviously been mentioning the pros of living in Dubai and the UAE as a whole and all of the great attributes it has. So by no surprise you can imagine that there are a lot of people that do want to relocate here. So it's not a very, very easy task. So I'm going to give a few tips which I believe would help any female looking for work in the Middle East, specifically Dubai, that would maybe help give them that little push and help them get on the ground and hit the ground running. So talking from experience, I work in human resources management, specifically in the healthcare sector. Now, I've only ever worked in the healthcare sector through and through for the last decade, so I really just wanted to focus on that niche of healthcare so that when there is a job opportunity arising, perhaps just looking for an HR leader in healthcare, I would fit that bill because it's all that I've ever done. So I recommend that for anyone really, because there are a lot of careers out there and industries which are somewhat saturated, and there are a lot of candidates existing here. HR, finance, accounting, business management, there's many candidates in these fields. However, if you kind of pinpoint yourself to a specific industry and stick with that industry, you will gain exposure and reputation in that industry, thus be more employable here on the ground in the UAE. Also, times are changing, so if you are looking to relocate to the Middle East but you do have children, you do have a spouse, and you think that that could hold you back, times have changed. Now women can sponsor their husbands, their children, so it's not very male-led in that sense anymore. Women can be the breadwinner of the family and they can relocate on their initiative and sponsor their family to come along. So I think that's also a very important point to add. Other kind of general tips and tricks that I've seen, I see a lot of job seekers that come over on a visit visa before kind of committing to that move to scope out the market and set up some face-to-face meetings on the ground. Although I think with the COVID-19 pandemic and video calling becoming so prominent, it is still something that you can do in your home country and set up video calls with prospective employers and things like that. And that's it really. The good thing is that Arabic language is not mandatory for most private sector companies. Dubai is a very multicultural environment. We are an absolute melting pot of cultures. I've met nationalities here that I would have never dreamed of meeting when I was still in the UK, and everybody that I come across does speak English, something that I sometimes struggle with in other Gulf countries. So UAE is great in that sense. And yeah, that's it really.
Oh, these are lovely suggestions. Top of it, because you are a human resource professional, so I want to gain this opportunity while you are sitting next to me. A lot of people are approaching me daily basis on my LinkedIn or with reference, without references, and what I see is they are good but they don't know how to present themselves in terms of a proper CV or what they should do, where that recruiters really start taking interest in them. What are your advice in terms of resume, biodata or profile, what they should do in order to be more attractive for the recruiter?
So, a few ways to answer this question. Initially, the way I'm going to open is that, as you can imagine, Dubai being such an attractive place to live, there is high competition and oversaturation in lots of markets. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that prospective candidates make is that they don't amend their CV based on the job opening. So for example, say candidate A is an operations manager and has experience in a few sectors such as retail, food and beverage, wholesale, etc., and they are applying for a job that is an operations manager just for the hospitality field. They may think that their CV is a good suit for this, given that that is something that they've worked in before, and send it over to the employer. However, what they're missing is there may be 100 other candidates that have worked wholly and solely in hospitality operations management, and they have now submitted a CV with almost irrelevant information around those other fields. So what I mean by this is that I think that candidates should really tailor-make their CV for every individual job that they are applying for. Also check the requirements and don't just apply to a job that you may not fit to, because that could potentially kind of blacklist your profile to future job openings, because these days a lot of organisations use ATS, and what I mean by that is applicant tracking software, and this is a very kind of sometimes AI powered, sometimes not system, whereas there's not really any human intervention. So you may look fantastic on paper, but when a robot or machine is just picking up a few keywords from your CV, if that's lacking, you're not going to get shortlisted. So that's why I really think you need to tailor-make your CV and pick out keywords from the job description, put them in your CV and change that for every job you apply to, because you might just be slipping through the net. Other than that, I think when approaching and looking for a job in the UAE, yes, applying on job boards is great, but I do think that one needs to be more proactive to their approach. And what I mean by that, they could perhaps reach out to hiring managers on LinkedIn, and they could also reach out to recruitment agencies which specialise in their field. So there's so many recruitment agencies on the ground here in the Emirates that lots of them really kind of hole into a particular industry, such as construction, engineering, healthcare, IT, finance. So if you look for a recruitment agency that specialises in your specialism, they will more than likely be able to perhaps help and send your CV out to some of their clients. I think LinkedIn is a fantastic tool. I use it pretty much every day. I do a lot of micro-blogging on the site. I have quite a lot of followers on the site, I believe close to 40,000 now. So it's a really good way to reach decision makers. You would be surprised. So that's another key element that I would like to recommend, and do these along with obviously checking job boards and job postings, and I think that you will maximise the chances on getting your CV noticed and reaching out to people that are hiring into the Gulf.
Oh, that's lovely. These advices can change and transform the life of every applicant. This is, I believe in, and please listen to these advices very carefully and adapt in your life so you can get a better chance to work in the Gulf countries. With this also, I have always a question in my mind. When I go to America, I meet different doctors, nurses, technicians, healthcare professionals, especially when I come to UK also. They are similar surgeons, doctors, consultants, technicians, nurses, all the paramedical staff. They are really excited about working in the Gulf areas, and they always have no knowledge about it. It's just what they know is they want to go in this area because they heard so many good things about Gulf, but they have no idea at all that how to enter, whom to meet, what's the first step, what is the local licensing, anything. They don't have any idea. And I feel this opportunity, you are sitting next to me, I want to ask this question from you today. Please tell all the people out who are listening to you that if they are from healthcare industry specifically, what they should do that Gulf become their second home.
You're absolutely right. It can be very daunting for healthcare professionals to even begin their job search in the Middle East, and that's because things are just so different to what we're kind of used to back home, especially in the UK. So, for example, we have a whole different licensing criteria in the UAE, which any medical professional needs to gain before they can actually start employment and even look for employment. I mean, with the number of licensed healthcare professionals out there, candidates that are still overseas with no grasp or knowledge of the license are pretty much going to get their files overlooked. So I'll give a short rundown of the licensing in the UAE. So in Dubai we have what's called the Dubai Healthcare Authority, and in Abu Dhabi and other Emirates we have what's called Ministry of Health. And basically it's the license very similar to the GMC in the UK, which a medical professional needs to obtain in order to work here. Now, some doctors do manage to secure a job offer conditionally pending getting their license, but what I'm noticing these days is a lot of more medical professionals are taking a proactive approach and going out there and getting the medical license themselves, so that they will be more appealing to hire to hospitals, clinics and healthcare setups here in the UAE. So there are companies that do it on your behalf, but I've also seen healthcare professionals go ahead and do it on their own. To quickly run you through the steps, it's a very document heavy process, so a lot of documents are supplied and verified by a third party called Dataflow, and then sometimes in the rare occasion a healthcare professional may have to sit a prometric exam, which is like a licensing exam, and then they will get their eligibility letter and they can start seeking work, and then that is then changed to a full license once they find an employer. So, as I said, a lot of medical professionals, especially doctors, are taking the proactive approach to do this before seeking work. Maybe they just felt that their CV wasn't getting answered, and this is particularly common in specialties which are not so highly in demand. I mean, there are specialties here in the UAE which you can imagine already have an abundance of doctors, so there's a lot of GPs here already. However, if you're a doctor or a healthcare professional working in a really, really niche area, maybe you're a stoma nurse, for example, or you're a pediatric endocrinologist, and you know that there are not kind of many of your specialty around in the Middle East, then a hospital might actually kind of take that paperwork away from you and do it on your behalf, because you'd be considered as quite a rare specialty to find, so they would do that for you. But for medical professionals working in kind of a more generalised setting, I definitely recommend going ahead and doing that paperwork process yourself. So it is quite daunting, and it is hard to find the information out there online, so I'll give you a few points on what to Google. You can Google Dataflow, Dubai Health Authority, but the good thing is there's a lot of recruitment agencies that specialise in placing healthcare professionals into the UAE presently, so they'll also give you an abundance of free information. People like me as well, the kind of recruitment directors of individual hospitals can always give advice too, so if you ever do come across us on LinkedIn, feel free to pop us a message.
What are lovely suggestions about healthcare. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Now we are heading towards our last questions of the day. So my question is about advice to women who is listening to us. The reason why I want to ask this question is I was studying some statistics. I noticed that the women ratio versus men is increasing. So we can expect in next 50 years there will be more women and less men. means that today we need to prepare the women for a future leadership. So means that they need more education, more skill transfer, more knowledge. That's what is making me worried, and that's what I am focusing on: women development and making women capable to lead the world in the future. I want your advice, who is listening to us, what they should do to be successful like you.
Thank you, Dr. Musa. So first and foremost, I want to say break the bias. And I'm saying that to all women listening globally. And what I mean by this is that there's a lot of bias out there when it comes to women in the workforce, and this needs to be broken. So if you are a female that perhaps has an interest in working in a very kind of not usual industry, such as you want to be in the police force, you want to be a lawyer, don't think that this is a male-dominated industry, and put yourself forward to study and go forth and do a career in such. Like I was saying earlier, I personally work in a male-dominated industry, and I don't feel inferior, I don't feel intimidated, I feel respected, and I feel that women are going to be the next leaders. So you should do the same. And if it's not our generation that changes that bias and moves into industries which perhaps were not once worked in by women, then the change will never happen. We have to be that change. So the theme of 2022 and the theme of this interview for women empowerment is break the bias.
So many lovely talks we did today, and it is an amazing opportunity for me and for my audience to listen to you. I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'm hoping that I will keep having you in my shows. It is always pleasure to sit with you and learn and share a lot of experiences. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I want to close this session for the day, and I will catch you in my next episode. Till then, take care of yourself and goodbye.